Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Synergetic Games. My name is Natalie, and today we are going to be continuing reading Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Thank you so much for the lurk, by the way, aggressively. I appreciate that. I hope you're doing well. So I missed last week because I was too tired to function, which happens sometimes. I don't know why. Thank you for the hype. Hi Abnock, how you been? So listen, we're gonna go until I get bored. I read ahead like last week and I didn't pick it up today, so we're gonna go however long I feel like. I feel like we could do this in 1 or 2 more sessions if we're good. And then I think I'm going to take a bit of a break from story time, and when we come back, I'm kind of vibing. I want to say like 2-3 weeks, maybe a month of just, I don't know, doing something else on Saturdays. Possibly some games that don't require too much thought. And you know, stuff like that. I don't want to commit to anything really, but I want to give my reading a break for a little bit. Maybe catch up on some games that we haven't checked out recently. Maybe I'm just being impatient to play new games, but maybe community games. Yes, this is true. We could do things like Phasmophobia or other such games. I don't know, what else do people play? What games do people play? I don't. You do miss Phasma? Yeah, me too. I miss Phasma. But there are games that I have on a you've probably heard of it, but itch.io games. I bought like a bunch of horror games as part of like a bundle a while ago, and I've explored like a handful of them, and I kind of want to maybe spend some time exploring those games with you guys. Most of them are gonna probably be browser games. We may have to install a few to check out at any given time. A lot of them are like gonna end up being works in progress or not very, you know. Some of them are going to be works in progress for sure, and some of them are going to be very, very basic. I remember I played one, which I found quite creepy actually. I don't remember which one it was, which makes this statement really stupid. But yeah, no, we can definitely work on doing some games as a community if that is what people are interested in. Definitely. Just gotta open. Hang on. Let me do a thing. Oh yeah, sure. Sorry, I was just going through my games and being like, which one's multiplayer? We could do a community game of Among Us if we feel like it. Age of Empires, if you're into that. Age of Mythology, also. I don't know. Crusader Kings 2, because 3 won't fucking work for me, but you know, screw me, I guess. Power fucking whatever. Who made you? Who made you? Curse that company. I'm gonna name some names. Paradox. Fuck you, Paradox. Just saying. Age of Empires 2 and 4. I've got Age of Empires 2. Just saying. Well, maybe we can work on that one. We could also do I don't know how it would work, because the only time I've ever seen it played in 2-player is when the players were in the same room, but you know, supposedly Beyond Two Souls is 2-player, which it is, but I don't know if you can do like remote play. And it's just started raining really heavily. So give me a moment. I'm going to see if my cat wants to flee indoors. Pardon me. Come on. Come inside, baby. Did you know Charlotte's coming? Well, she went out there, and then she kind of sat on the step. And then it started raining really heavily, and I couldn't imagine she'd go very far. Okay, but like seriously, fuck Paradox. Um, but yeah, it's just they still haven't fixed that bug thing. So I can't load any of my saved games because there's DLC that I don't have, but I have all the DLC. I have it. I have it all. I have it all. But part of it's not working, and they won't fix it. They're busy doing everything else. No, we don't. I don't. I assume I could still play a thingy. Sorry, Crusader Kings 2. I can still play Crusader Kings 2, but I cannot play Crusader Kings 3. And it's their fault, basically. It's not me. It's them. It's not me just being inept at technology. It's them, and they know it's an issue that exists. And you know what? They shut me down so hard. They were so rude. They were so rude. when I was trying to get help from them, I had a thread with somebody, and they shut me down so hard. I just am so pissed off with them right now. Like, every once in a blue moon, I'll check in, see if they've sorted their problem, but no, they haven't, because they're too busy with whatever it is they're doing to deal with existing issues. They'd rather roll out new content. That they're at that stage. So they pissed me off. I wish they hadn't. I've also got a game called Traveler's Rest, which apparently you can play as multiplayer, but I don't know if it's remote. Oh no, it is remote, but it's literally only 2-player. And I've got a game called Town of Salem. That's multiplayer. We could do that as a community. That's something interesting. It's not a very expensive game either. But I did get it on sale, so it was like extra cheap at the time. Well, not all Steam games. I mean, it'd definitely be sensible if it were. You just need to share controllers and screens. This bodes well for my friggin' reading, doesn't it? Does anybody else have thunder? I just thought I'd ask real quick, because we're having a proper storm right now. Yes, please do show me. Apparently BioShock 2 is multiplayer? And I'm not mad about that. That could make it actually tolerable to do. Because I'm not sure I want to play it solo again. We shall see. I don't know, there's Dead by Daylight, which I'm not very good at, to be honest, but, you know. There's also Northgard, if you guys like, your real-time strategy games. They've bigged up the multiplayer content recently. Sometimes It's outrageously unbalanced, but I'm getting the picture that they're sorting that out. And of course, there's multiplayer Portal 2. Anyway, we've got options. We've got options to check out. It's fine. We'll do like a poll in Discord or something. So if you're not a member, I encourage you to subscribe. But if you just like join the channel, you don't have to subscribe. But we'll probably figure something out on a channel to do a poll properly, so like everyone in the community can vote in the poll regardless. We'll figure it out. But as I say, it's not going to be for a while. At least a week. But the point is, I'm going to bring this back. I'm going to bring Storytime back after we finish this. And I'm kind of vibing Stephen King's Misery. It's gonna be a time, guys, reading that book. So, you know, make sure you bring your happy place with you, because it's not gonna be in the book. Just saying. Okay, so this is what we're gonna do. We are gonna sit. Do you know what's great about my new chair? Is I can do this. I can also move the partition, which I don't really want to do. But the point is, I can lean back in my chair. That's within my power now. I can recline if I so chose. And that makes me happy. So anyway, we're gonna get into this now. Thank you so much for your patience for my rambling and all that jazz, but I feel like sometimes we need a good ramble. Right, so, Chapter 22, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He was standing with his back to Arthur, watching the very last glimmers of light sink into the blackness behind the horizon. He was tallish, elderly, and dressed in a single long grey robe. When he turned his face, he was thin and distinguished, careworn but not unkind, the sort of face you would happily bank with. But he didn't turn yet, not even to react to Arthur's yelp of surprise. Eventually, the last rays of the sun had vanished completely, and he turned. His face was still illuminated from somewhere, and when Arthur looked for the source of the light, he saw that a few yards away stood a small craft of some kind. A small hovercraft, Arthur guessed. It shed a dim pool of light around it. The man looked at Arthur, sadly it seemed. "You choose a cold night to visit our dead planet," he said. Who are you?" stammered Arthur. The man looked away. Again a look of sadness seemed to cross his face. "My name is not important," he said. He seemed to have something on his mind. Conversation was clearly something he felt he didn't have to rush at. Arthur felt awkward. You startled me," he said lamely. The man looked round him again and slightly raised his eyebrows. He said. "I said you startled me." "Do not be alarmed. I will not harm you." Arthur frowned at him. "But you shot at us. There were missiles," he said. The man gazed into the pit of the crater. The slight glow from Marvin's eyes cast very faint red shadows on the huge carcass of the whale. The man chuckled slightly. "An automatic system," he said, and gave a small sigh. "Ancient computers ranged in the bowels of the planet. Tick away the dark millennia, and the ages hang heavy on their dusty databanks. I think they took the occasional pot shot to relieve the monotony." He looked gravely at Arthur and said, "I'm a great fan of science, you know." "Oh, really?" said Arthur, who was beginning to find the man's curious, kindly manner disconcerting. "Oh, yes," he said the old man, and simply stopped talking again. Said Arthur. He had an odd feeling of being like a man in the act of adultery who is surprised when the woman's husband wanders into the room, changes his trousers, passes a few idle remarks about the weather, and leaves again. You seem ill at ease, said the man with polite concern. No. Well, yes. Actually, you see, we weren't really expecting to find anybody about, in fact. I sort of gathered that you were all dead or something. Dead, said the old man. Good gracious me, no. We have but slept. Slept, said Arthur incredulously, playing Pandemic. Fair enough. That is quite possibly one of the most depressing games ever, if you really give it some thought. Yes, through the economic recession, you see, said the old man, apparently unconcerned about whether Arthur understood a word he was talking about or not. Arthur had to prompt him again. Economic recession? Well, you see, 5 million years ago, the galactic economy collapsed. And seeing that custom-built planets are something of a luxury commodity, you see, he paused and looked at Arthur. You know we built planets, do you? He asked solemnly. Well, yes, said Arthur. I'd sort of gathered. Fascinating trade, said the old man, and a wistful look came into his eyes. Doing the coastlines was always my favourite. Used to have endless fun doing the little bits in the fjords. So, anyway, he said, trying to find his thread again, the recession came, and we decided it would save a lot of bother if we just slept through it. So we programmed the computers to revive us when it was all over. The man stifled a very slight yawn and continued. The computers were index linked to the galactic stock market prices, you see, so that we'd all be revived when everybody else had rebuilt the economy enough to afford our rather expensive services. Arthur, a regular garden reader, was deeply shocked by this. That's a pretty unpleasant way to behave, isn't it? Is it? Asked the old man mildly. I'm sorry, I'm a bit out of touch. He pointed down into the crater. Is that robot yours? He said. No, came a thin metallic voice from the crater. I'm mine. If you'd call it a robot, muttered Arthur, it's more a sort of electronic sulking machine. Bring it, said the old man. Arthur was quite surprised to hear a note of decision suddenly present in the old man's voice. He called to Marvin, who crawled up the slope, making a big show of being lame, which he wasn't. On second thought, said the old man, leave it here. You must come with me. Great things are afoot. He turned towards his craft, which, though no apparent signal had been given, now drifted quietly towards them through the dark. Arthur looked down at Marvin, who now made an equally big show of turning around laboriously and trudging off down into the crater again, muttering sour nothings to himself. Come, called the old man. Come now, or you'll be late. Late, said Arthur. For what? What is your name, human? Dent. Arthur Dent, said Arthur. Late as in the late Dent Arthur Dent, said the old man sternly. It's a sort of threat, you see. Another wistful look came into his tired eyes. I've never been very good at them myself, but I'm told they can be very effective. Arthur blinked at him. What an extraordinary person, he muttered to himself. I beg your pardon, said the old man. Oh, nothing, I'm sorry, said Arthur in embarrassment. All right, where do we go? In my air car, said the old man, motioning Arthur to get into the craft, which had settled silently next to them. We're going deep into the bowels of the planet where even now our race is being revived from its 5 million-year slumber. Magrathea awakes. Arthur shivered involuntarily as he seated himself next to the old man. The strangeness of it, the silent bobbing movement of the craft as it soared into the night sky, quite unsettled him. He looked at the old man, his face illuminated by the dull glow of tiny lights on the instrument panel. "Excuse me," he said to him. "What is your name, by the way?" "My name?" said the old man, and the same distant sadness came into his face again. He paused. "My name," he said, "is Slarty Bartfast." Arthur practically choked. "I beg your pardon," he spluttered. "Slarty Bartfast," repeated the old man quietly. "Slarty Bartfast?" The old man looked at him gravely. "I said it wasn't important," he said. The air car sailed through the night. Chapter 23. It is an important and popular fact that things are not always what they seem. For instance, on the planet Earth, man had always assumed that he was more intelligent than dolphins because he had achieved so much. The wheel, New York, wars, and so on. Whilst all the dolphins had ever done was muck about in the water and having a good time. But conversely, the dolphins had always believed that they were far more intelligent than man, for precisely the same reasons. Curiously enough, the dolphins had long known of the impending destruction of the planet Earth, and had made many attempts to alert mankind to the danger, but most of their communications were misinterpreted as amusing attempts to punch footballs or whistle for tidbits. So they eventually gave up and left Earth by their own means, shortly before the Vogons arrived. The last ever dolphin message was misinterpreted as a surprisingly sophisticated attempt to do a double backward somersault through a hoop whilst whistling the Star-Spangled Banner. But in fact the message was this: "So long, and thanks for all the fish." In fact, there was only one species on the planet more intelligent than dolphins, and they spent a lot of their time in behavioral research laboratories running around inside wheels and conducting frighteningly elegant and subtle experiments on man. The fact that once again man completely misinterpreted this relationship was entirely according to these creatures' plans. Chapter 24. Silently, the air car coasted through the cold darkness as a single soft glow of light that was utterly alone in the deep Magrathian night. It sped swiftly. Arthur's companion seemed sunk in his own thoughts, and when Arthur tried on a couple of occasions to engage him in conversation again, he would simply reply by asking if he was comfortable enough, and then left it at that. A true British intellectual. Hi, Starbreeze, thank you. Welcome to the channel. Arthur tried to gauge the speed at which they were traveling, but the blackness outside was absolute, and he was denied any reference points. The sense of motion was so soft and slight he could almost believe they were hardly moving at all. Then a tiny glow of light appeared in the far distance, and within seconds had grown so much in size that Arthur realized it was traveling towards them at a colossal speed. And he tried to make out what sort of craft it might be. He peered at it, but was unable to discern any clear shape, and suddenly gasped in alarm as the air car dipped sharply and headed downwards into what seemed certain to be a collision course. Their relative velocity seemed unbelievable, and Arthur had hardly time to draw breath before it was all over. The next thing he was aware of was an insane silver blur that seemed to surround him. He twisted his head sharply around and saw a small black point dwindling rapidly in the distance behind them, and it took him several seconds to realize what had happened. They had plunged into a tunnel in the ground. The colossal speed had been their own relative to the glow of light, which was a stationary hole in the ground, the mouth of the tunnel. The insane blur of silver was the circular wall of the tunnel down which they were shooting, apparently at several hundred miles an hour. He closed his eyes in terror. After a length of time which he made no attempt to judge, he sensed a slight subsidence in their speed, and some while later became aware they were gradually gliding to a gentle halt. He opened his eyes again. They were still in the silver tunnel, threading and weaving their way through what appeared to be a crisscross warren of converging tunnels. When they finally stopped, it was in a small chamber of curved steel. Several tunnels also had their terminus here. And at the further end of the chamber, Arthur could see a large circle of dim, irritating light. It was irritating because it played tricks with the eyes. It was impossible to focus on it properly or tell how near or far it was. Arthur guessed, quite wrongly, that it might be ultraviolet. Slarty Bartfast turned to regard Arthur with his solemn old eyes. "Earthman," he said, "we are now deep in the heart of Magrathea." "How did you know I was an Earthman?" demanded Arthur. "These things will become clear to you," said the old man gently. "At least," he added with a slight doubt in his voice, "clearer than they are at the moment." He continued, "I should warn you that the chamber we are about to pass into does not literally exist within our planet. It is a little too large. We are about to pass through a gateway into a vast tract of hyperspace. It may disturb you." Arthur made nervous noises. Slarty Bartfast touched a button and added, not entirely reassuringly, "It scares the willies out of me. Hold tight." The car shot forward straight into a circle of light, and suddenly Arthur had a fairly clear idea of what infinity looked like. It wasn't infinity, in fact. Infinity itself looked flat and uninteresting. Looking up into the night sky is looking into infinity. Distance is incomprehensible and therefore meaningless. The chamber into which the air car emerged was anything but infinite. It was just very, very, very big. So big that it gave the impression of infinity far better than infinity itself. Okay, turn the page. We're all good. Arthur's senses bobbed and span as, traveling at the intense speed he knew the air car attained, they climbed slowly through the open air, leaving the gateway through which they had passed, an invisible pinprick in the shimmering wall behind them. The wall. The wall defied the imagination, seduced it, and defeated it. The wall was so paralyzingly vast and sheer that its top, bottom, and sides passed away beyond the reach of sight. The mere shock of vertigo could kill a man. The wall appeared perfectly flat. It would take the finest laser measuring equipment to detect that as it climbed, apparently to infinity, as it dropped dizzyingly away, as it panned out to either side, it also curved. It met itself again 13 light seconds away. In other words, the wall formed the inside of a hollow sphere. A sphere over 3 million miles across and flooded with unimaginable light. Welcome, said Slutty Bartfast, as the tiny speck that was the air car, travelling now at 3 times the speed of sound, crept imperceptibly forward into the mind-boggling space. Welcome, he said, to our factory floor. Arthur stared about him in a kind of wonderful horror. Ranged away before them, at distances he could neither judge nor even guess at, were a series of curious suspensions, delicate traceries of metal, and light hung about shadowy spherical shapes that hung in the space. This, said Slarty Bartfast, is where we make most of our planets, you see. You mean, said Arthur, trying to form words, you mean you're starting it all up again now? No, no, good heavens, no, exclaimed the old man. No, the galaxy isn't nearly rich enough to support us yet. No, we've been awakened to perform just one extraordinary commission for very special clients from another dimension. It may interest you. There in the distance in front of us. Arthur followed the old man's finger till he was able to pick out the floating structure he was pointing out. It was indeed the only one of the many structures that betrayed any sign of activity about it, though this was more of a subliminal impression than anything one could put a finger on. At the moment, however, a flash of light arced through the structure and revealed in stark relief the patterns that were formed on the dark sphere within. Patterns that Arthur knew. Rough bobbly shapes that were familiar to him as the shapes of words, parts of the furniture of his mind. For a few seconds he sat in stunned silence as the images rushed around his mind and he tried to find somewhere to settle down and make sense. Part of his brain told him that he knew perfectly well what he was looking at and what the shapes represented, whilst others quite sensibly refused to countenance the idea and abdicated responsibility for any further thinking in that direction. The flash came again, and this time there could be no doubt. The Earth, whispered Arthur. Well, the Earth Mark II, in fact, said Slarty Bartfast, cheerfully. We're making a copy from our original blueprints. There was a pause. Are you trying to tell me, said Arthur slowly, with control, that you originally made the Earth? Hi, Dan Lionheart. Welcome. Welcome to the stream. Oh, yes, said Slarty Bartfast. Did you ever go to a place, I think it was called Norway? No, said Arthur. No, I didn't. Pity, said Slarty Bartfast. That was one of mine. Won an award, you know. Lovely crinkly edges. I was most upset to hear of its destruction. You were upset? Yes. 5 minutes later, and it wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered so much. It was a quite shocking cock-up. Huh? Said Arthur. The mice were furious. The mice were furious? Oh, yes, said the old man mildly. Yes, well, so I expect were the dogs and the cats and the duck-billed platypuses, but they hadn't paid for it, you see, had they? Look, said Arthur. Would it save you a lot of time if I just gave up and went mad now? For a while the air car flew on in awkward silence. Then the old man tried patiently to explain. Earthman, the planet you lived on was commissioned, paid for, and run by mice. It was destroyed 5 minutes before the completion of the purpose for which it was built, and we've got to build another one. Only one word was registering with Arthur. Mice? He said. Indeed, Earthman. Look, sorry, are we talking about little white furry things with the cheese fixation and women standing on tables screaming in early 60s sitcoms? Slarty Bartfast coughed politely. Earthman, he said. It is sometimes hard to follow your mode of speech. Remember, I have been asleep inside this planet of Magrathea for 5 million years, and know little of these early 60s sitcoms of which you speak. These creatures you call mice, you see, they're not quite as they appear. They are merely the protrusion into our dimension of vast, hyper-intelligent, pan-dimensional beings. The whole business with the cheese and the squeaking is just a front. The old man paused with a sympathetic frown, and with a sympathetic frown continued. They've been experimenting on you, I'm afraid. Arthur thought about this for a second, and then his face cleared. Oh, no, he said. I see the source of the misunderstanding now. No. Look, you see, what happened was that we used to do experiments on them. They were often used in behavioral research, Pavlov and all that sort of stuff. So what happened was that the mice would be set all sorts of tests, learning the rings, learning to ring bells, run around mazes and things, so that the whole nature of the learning process could be examined. From our observations of their behavior, we were able to learn all sorts of things about our own. Arthur's voice trailed off. Such subtlety, said Slarty Bartfast. One has to admire it. What? Said Arthur. How better to disguise their real natures, and how better to guide your thinking. Suddenly running down a maze the wrong way, eating the wrong bit of cheese, unexpectedly dropping dead of myoxymatosis, or whatever it is. If it's finely calculated, the cumulative effect is enormous. He paused for effect. You see, Earthman, they really are particularly clever, hyper-intelligent, pan-dimensional beings. Your planet and people have formed the matrix of an organic computer running a 10 million year research program. Let me tell you the whole story. It'll take a little time. Time, said Arthur weakly, is currently not one of my problems. Myxomatosis, okay. Hi, Gray, how you been? I am also very well, thank you, Dan. Thank you for asking. I've never seen that word. I've never seen that word before, let alone read it out loud. So thank you for correcting me there. Chapter 25. There are, of course, many problems connected with life. Of course, some of the most popular are: why are people born? Why do they die? Why do they want to spend so much of their time so much of the intervening time wearing digital watches? Many millions of years ago, a race of hyper-intelligent pan-dimensional beings whose physical manifestation in their own pan-dimensional universe is not dissimilar to our own, got so fed up with the constant bickering about the meaning of life, which used to interrupt their favorite pastime of Brockian ultra cricket, a curious game which involved suddenly hitting people for no readily apparent reason and then running away, that they decided to sit down and solve their problems once and for all. And to this end, they built themselves a stupendous supercomputer which was so amazingly intelligent that even before its data banks had been connected up, it had started from I think therefore I am, and got as far as deducing the existence of rice pudding and income tax before anyone managed to turn it off. It was the size of a small city. Its main console was installed in a specially designed executive office mounted on an enormous executive desk of finest ultra mahogany, topped with rich ultra red leather. The dark carpeting was discreetly sumptuous, exotic pot plants and tastefully engraved prints of the principal computer programmers, and their families were deployed liberally about the room, and stately windows looked out upon a tree-lined public square. On the day of the great on-turning, two soberly dressed programmers with briefcases arrived and were shown discreetly into the office. They were aware that this day they would represent their entire race in its greatest moment. But they conducted themselves calmly and quietly as they seated themselves deferentially before the desk, opened their briefcases and took out their leather-bound notebooks. Their names were Lunkwell and Fook. For a few moments they sat in respectful silence. Then, after exchanging a quiet glance with Fook, Lunkwell leaned forward and touched a small black panel. The subtlest of hums indicated that the massive computer was now in total active mode. After a pause, it spoke to them in a voice rich, resonant, and deep. It said, "What is this great task for which I, Deep Thought, the second greatest computer in the universe of time and space, have been called into existence?" Lunkwell and Fook glanced at each other in surprise. "Your task, O computer," began Fook. "No, wait a minute, this isn't right," said Lunkwell, worried. "We distinctly designed this computer to be the greatest one ever, and we're not making do with the second best. Deep Thought," he addressed the computer, "are you not, as we designed you to be, the greatest, most powerful computer in all time?" "I describe myself as the second greatest," intoned Deep Thought, "and such I am." Another worried look passed between the two programmers. Lunkwell cleared his throat. "There must be some mistake," he said. "Are you not a greater computer than the Milliard Gargantua brain at the Maximegalon, which can count all the atoms in a star in a millisecond?" "The Milliard Gargantua brain," said Deep Thought with unconcealed contempt. A mere abacus. Mention it not." "And are you not," said Fook, leaning anxiously forward, "a greater analyst than the Googleplex star thinker in the seventh galaxy of light and ingenuity, which can calculate the trajectory of every single dust particle throughout a 5-week Dangrabad beta sand blizzard?" "A 5-week sand blizzard," said Deep Thought haughtily. "You ask this of me, who have contemplated the very vectors of the atom in the Big Bang itself. Molest me not with this pocket calculator stuff." The two programmers sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then Lunkwell leaned forward again. "But are you not," he said, "a more fiendish disputant than the great hyperlobic omnicognate neutron wrangler of Ciceronicus 12, the magic and indefatigable? The great hyperbolic omnicognate neutron wrangler," said Deep Thought, thoroughly rolling its Lunkwell, thoroughly rolling the R's, could talk all four legs off an Arcturian mega donkey, but only I could persuade it to go for a walk afterwards. Then what, asked Fook, is the problem? There is no problem, said Deep Thought with magnificent ringing tones. I am simply the second greatest computer in the universe of space and time. But the second, insisted Lunkwell. Why do you keep saying the second? You're surely not thinking of the multi-corticoid Perceptron Titan Muller, are you? Or the Pondomatic, or the contemptuous lights flashed across the computer's console. I spare not a single unit of thought on these cybernetic simpletons, he boomed. I speak of none but the computer that is to come after me. Fook was losing patience. He pushed his notebook aside and muttered, I think this is getting needlessly messianic. So many words in this book. So many words. You know nothing of future time, pronounced Deep Thought, and yet in my teeming circuitry I can navigate the infinite delta streams of future probability and see that there must one day come a computer whose merest operational parameters I am not worthy to calculate, but which it will be my fate eventually to design. Fook sighed heavily and glanced across to Lunkwell. Can we get on and ask the question? He said. Lunkwell motioned him to wait. What computer is this of which you speak? He asked. I will speak of it no further in this present time, said Deep Thought. Now, ask what else of me you will, that I may function. Speak. They shrugged at each other. Fook composed himself. Oh, Deep Thought computer, he said, the task we have designed for you to perform is this. We want you to tell us. He paused. The answer. The answer, said Deep Thought. The answer to what? Life, urged Fook. The universe, said Lunkwell. Everything, they said in chorus. Deep Thought paused for a moment's reflection. Tricky, he said finally. But can you do it? Again, a significant pause. Yes, said Deep Thought. I can do it. There is an answer, said Fook, with breathless excitement. A simple answer, added Lunkwell. Yes, said Deep Thought. Life, the universe, and everything. There is an answer. But, he added, I'll have to think about it. A sudden commotion destroyed the moment. The door flew open and two angry men wearing the coarse faded blue robes and belts of the Cruxwan University burst into the room, thrusting aside the ineffectual flunkies who tried to bar their way. We demand admission! Shouted the younger of the two men, elbowing a pretty young secretary in the throat. Come on, shouted the older one. You can't keep us out. He pushed the junior programmer back through the door. We demand that you can't keep us out, bawled the younger one, though he was now firmly inside the room and no further attempts were being made to stop him. Who are you? Said Lunkwell, rising angrily from his seat. What do you want? I am Malekthis, announced the older one, and I demand that I am Vroomfondel, shouted the younger one. Malekthis turned on Vroomfondel. It's all right, he explained angrily. You don't need to demand that. All right, bawled Vroomfondel, banging on a nearby desk. I am Vroomfondel, and that is not a demand. That is a solid fact. What we demand is solid facts. No, we don't, exclaimed Malekthis in irritation. This is precisely what we don't demand. Scarcely pausing for breath, Vroomfundel shouted, "We don't demand solid facts. What we demand is a total absence of solid facts. I demand that I may or may not be Vroomfundel." "But who the devil are you?" explained an outraged Fook. "We," said Malekthis, "are philosophers." "Though we may not be," said Vroomfundel, waving a warning finger at the programmers. "Yes, we are," insisted Malekthis. "We are quite definitely here as representatives of the amalgamated union of philosophers, sages, luminaires, and other thinking persons, and we want this machine off. And we want it off now." "What's the problem?" said Lunkwill. "I'll tell you what the problem is, mate," said Malekthis. "Demarcation, that's the problem." "We demand," yelled Vroomfundel, "that demarcation may or may not be the problem." "You just let the machines get on with the adding up," warned Malekthis. "And we'll take care of the eternal verities. Thank you very much." "You want to check your legal position, you do, mate. Under the law, the quest for ultimate truth is quite clearly the inalienable prerogative of your working thinkers. Any bloody machine goes and actually finds it, we're all straight out of a job, aren't we? I mean, what's the use of us sitting up half the night arguing that there may or may not be a god if this machine only goes and gives you his bleeding phone number the next morning?" "That's right," shouted Vroomfundel. "We demand rigidly defined areas of doubt and uncertainty." Suddenly, a stentorian voice boomed across the room. "Might I make an observation at this point?" inquired Deep Thought. "We'll go on strike," yelled Vroomfundel. "That's right," agreed Malekthis. "You'll have a national philosopher's strike on your hands." The hum level in the room suddenly increased as several ancillary bass driver units mounted in sedately carved, varnished cabinet speakers around the room, cut in to give Deep Thought's voice a little more power. "All I wanted to say," bellowed the computer, "is that my circuits are now irrevocably committed to calculating the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything." He paused and satisfied himself that he now had everyone's attention before continuing more quietly. "But the program will take me a little while to run." Fook glanced impatiently at his watch. "How long?" he said. 7.5 million years, said Deep Thought. Lunkwell and Fook blinked at each other. 7.5 million years, they cried in chorus. Yes, declaimed Deep Thought. I said I'd have to think about it, didn't I? And it occurs to me that running a program like this is bound to create an enormous amount of popular publicity for the whole area of philosophy in general. Everyone's going to have their own theories about what answer I'm eventually going to come up with, and who better to capitalize on that media market than yourselves? So long as you can keep disagreeing with each other violently enough and slagging each other off in the popular press, and so long as you have clever agents, you can keep yourselves on the gravy train for life. How does that sound? The two philosophers gaped at him. Bloody hell, said Malekthis. Now that is what I call thinking. Yeah, Vroomfundil. Why do we never think of things like that? Dunno, said Vroomfundil in an awed whisper. Think our brains might be too highly trained, Malekthis. So saying, they turned on their heels and walked out of the door and into a lifestyle beyond their wildest dreams. Hi, Chopper. Thank you for the lurk. Chapter 26. Yes, very salutary, said Arthur after Slotty Bartfast had related the salient points of this story to him. But I don't understand what all this has got to do with the earth and mice and things. That is but the first half of the story, Earthman, said the old man. If you would care to discover what happened 7.5 million years later, on the great day of the answer, allow me to invite you to my study, where you can experience the events yourself on our sensor tape records. That is, unless you would care to take a quick stroll on the surface of New Earth. It's only half completed, I'm afraid. We haven't even finished burying the artificial dinosaur skeletons in the crust yet. Then we have the Tertiary and Quaternary periods and the Cenozoic era to lay down, and no, thank you, said Arthur. It wouldn't be quite the same. No, said Slotty Bartfast, it wouldn't be. And he turned the air car around and headed back towards the mind-numbing wall. Chapter 27. Oh boy. Slotty Bartfast's study was a total mess. Like the results of an explosion in a public library, the old man frowned as they stepped in. Terribly unfortunate, he said. A diode blew in one of the life support computers. When we tried to revive our cleaning staff, we discovered they'd been dead for nearly 30,000 years. Who's going to clear away the bodies? That's what I want to know. Look, why don't you sit yourself down over there and let me plug you in? He gestured Arthur towards a chair which looked as if it had been made out of the rib of a stegosaurus. It was made out of the rib of a stegosaurus, explained the old man, as he pottered about, fishing bits of wire out from under tottering piles of paper and drawing instruments. Here, he said, hold these. He passed a couple of striped wire ends to Arthur. The instant he took hold of them, a bird flew straight through him. He was suspended in mid-air and totally invisible to himself. Beneath him was a pretty tree-lined city square. All around it, as far as the eye could see, were white concrete buildings of airy, spacious design, but somewhat the worse for wear. Many were cracked and stained with rain. Today, however, the sun was shining, and a fresh breeze danced lightly through the trees, and the odd sensation that all the buildings were quietly humming was probably caused by the fact that the square and all the streets around it were thronged with cheerful, excited people. Somewhere a band was playing, brightly colored flags were fluttering in the breeze, and the spirit of carnival was in the air. Arthur felt extraordinarily lonely, stuck up in the air above it all, without so much as a body to his name. But before he had time to reflect on this, a voice rang out across the square and called for everyone's attention. A man standing on a brightly dressed dais, or dais, whichever one you want, before the building which clearly dominated the square was addressing the crowd over a tannoy. "O people who wait in the shadow of deep thought," he cried out, "honored descendants of Vroomfrandil and Malekthis, the greatest and most truly interesting pundits of the universe has ever known. The time of waiting is over." Wild cheers broke out amongst the crowd. Flags, streamers, and wolf whistles sailed through the air. The narrower streets looked rather like centipedes rolling over on their backs and frantically waving their legs in the air. 7.5 million years our race has waited for the great and hopefully enlightening day, cried the cheerleader, the day of the answer. Hurrahs burst from the ecstatic crowd. "Never again," cried the man. "Never again will we wake up in the morning and think, 'Who am I? What is my purpose in life? Does it really, cosmically speaking, matter if I don't get up and go to work?' For today we will finally learn once and for all the plain and simple answer to all these nagging little problems of life, the universe, and everything." As the crowd erupted once again, Arthur found himself gliding through the air and down towards one of the large, stately windows of the first floor of the building, behind the dais from which the speaker was addressing the crowd. He experienced a moment's panic as he sailed straight towards the window, which passed when a second or so later he found he had gone right through the solid glass without apparently touching it. It's not a great view, but thanks. No one in the room remarked on his particular arrival, which is hardly surprising as he wasn't there. He began to realize that the whole experience was merely a recorded projection of which knocked 6-track 70mm into a cocked hat. Hi, my baby. Hi. I've got a cat, you guys. The room was much as Slutty Bartfast had described it. In 7.5 million years it had been well looked after and cleaned regularly every century or so. The ultra-mahogany desk was worn at the edges, the carpet a little faded now, but the large computer terminal sat in sparkling glory on the desk's leather top, as bright as if it had been constructed yesterday. Yeah, she's so cute. You so much. Yeah, just gently torturing her. Sorry, I'll stop now. Constructed yesterday. Two severely dressed men sat respectfully before the terminal and waited. "The time is nearly upon us," said one, and Arthur was surprised to see a word suddenly materialize in the air just by the man's neck. The word was Loonqual, and it flashed a couple of times and then disappeared again. Before Arthur was able to assimilate this, the other man spoke, and the word Plooge. Plooge? Plooge. I'm going to call him Plooge. I'm Plooge. Appeared by his neck. 75,000 generations ago, our ancestors set this program in motion, the second man said. And in all that time, we will be the first to hear the computer speak. An awesome prospect, Ploosh, agreed the first man, and Arthur suddenly realized he was watching a recording with subtitles. "We are the ones who will hear," said Ploosh, "the answer to the greatest question of life." "The universe," said Loonquill. "And everything." "Shh," said Loonquill with a slight gesture. "I think Deep Thought is preparing to speak." There was a moment's expectant pause whilst panels slowly came to life on the front of the console. Lights flashed on and off experimentally and settled down into a businesslike pattern. A soft, low hum came from the communication channel. "Good morning," said Deep Thought at last. Good morning, oh Deep Thought," said Loonqual nervously. "Do you have, that is, An answer for you, interrupted Deep Thought majestically. Yes, I have. The two men shivered with expectancy. Their waiting had not been in vain. There really is one, breathed Ploosh. There really is one, confirmed Deep Thought. To everything. To the great question of life, the universe, and everything. Yes. Both the men had been trained for this moment. Their lives had been a preparation for it. They had been selected at birth as those who would witness the answer. But even so, they found themselves gasping and squirming like excited children. And you're ready to give it to us, urged Loonquill. I am. Now? Now, said Deep Thought. They both licked their dry lips. Though I don't think, added Deep Thought, that you're going to like it. Doesn't matter, said Plooch. We must know, now. Now, inquired Deep Thought. Yes, now. All right, said the computer, and settled into silence again. The two men fidgeted. The tension was unbearable. You're really not going to like it, observed Deep Thought. Tell us. All right, said Deep Thought. The answer to the great question, yes, of life, the universe, and everything, said Deep Thought. Yes, is, said Deep Thought, and paused. Yes, is, yes! 42, said Deep Thought, with infinite majesty and calm. Chapter 28. It was a long time before anyone spoke. Out of the corner of his eye, Plooch could see the sea of tense, expectant faces down in the square outside. We're going to get lynched, aren't we? He asked. It was a tough assignment, said Deep Thought mildly. 42! Yelled Loonquill. Is that all you've got to show for 7.5 million years' work? I checked it very thoroughly, said the computer, and that quite definitely is the answer. I think the problem, to be quite honest with you, is that you've never actually known what the question is. But it was the great question, the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything, howled Loonquill. Yes, said Deep Thought, with an air of one who suffers fools gladly. But what actually is it? A slow, stupefied silence crept over the men as they stared at the computer and then at each other. Well, you know, it's just everything. Everything, offered Plooch weakly. Exactly, said Deep Thought. So once you do know what the question actually is, you'll know what the answer means. Oh, terrific, muttered Plooch, flinging aside his notebook and wiping away a tiny tear. Look, all right, said Loonquill. Can you just please tell us the question? The ultimate question, yes, of life, the universe, and everything. Yes! Deep Thought pondered for a moment. Tricky, he said. But can you do it? Cried Loonquill. Deep Thought pondered this for another long moment. Finally, no, he said firmly. Both men collapsed into their chairs in despair. But I'll tell you who can, said Deep Thought. They both looked up sharply. Who? Tell us! Suddenly, Arthur began to feel his apparently non-existent scalp begin to crawl as he found himself moving slowly but inexorably forward towards the console. But it was only a dramatic zoom on the part of whoever had made this recording, he assumed. I speak of none other than the computer. Then the computer that is to come after me, intoned Deep Thought, his voice regaining its accustomed declamatory tones. A computer whose merest operational parameters I am not worthy to calculate, and yet I will design it for you. A computer which can calculate the question to the ultimate answer. A computer such infinite and subtle complexity that organic life itself shall form part of its operational matrix. And you yourself shall take on new forms and go down into the computer to navigate its 10 million year program. Yes, I shall design this computer for you, and I shall name it also unto you. And it shall be called the Earth. Plooge gaped at Deep Thought. What a dull name, he said, and great incisions appeared down the length of his body. Loonquill, too, suddenly sustained horrific gashes from nowhere. The computer console blotched and cracked. The walls flickered and crumbled, and the room crashed forward into its own ceiling. Slutty Barkfast was standing in front of Arthur, holding 2 wires. End of the tape, he explained. Watching YouTube with the wife, usually I'd just play it over, but you're avoiding divorce. Smart. And you know what? I think it's within the realms of reality that we can finish this next week. Because that is as far as I got, but if you guys really want me to finish it tonight, I can, but like I'm just saying I haven't read it, so there will be even more cock-ups than usual. That's all I'm saying. I'll tell you what. I'll do this. You guys, you've got 1 minute to do a poll. Do we finish the book? Yes or no? Reading as long as I can. Quitter. Wow. How mean. And after everything I do for you, no, I literally do fuck all for you, apart from like hang out sometimes. Hey, precious. At least that's what it feels like anyway. But honestly, I feel like you guys look after me more than I look after you. And I, for one, am okay with that. But if you're not, now's your opportunity to tell me so. We are sort of here, like this is the end. This is the rest of it. It's not very, there's like not a lot, but it looks like because of the webcam, it looks like there's more than there is. It's really not like a lot. I don't know if this helps at all. It's not a lot. Okay. Oh, go on. Yeah, she's cute. She's doing her little cat thing. Yeah. I don't know what she wants from me, but she doesn't want to go outside because it's wet and raining and it's sad, and we're gonna... let's see. Yep, realistically, there's really honestly not that many chapters left. Okay, sure. Let's go ahead and do this. Chapter 29. Zaphod, wake up! Hey, come on, wake up! Just let me stick to what I'm good at, yeah? Muttered Zaphod and rolled away from the voice back to sleep. Do you want me to kick you? Said Ford. Would it give you a lot of pleasure? Said Zaphod blearily. No, nor me. So what's the point? Stop bugging me, said Zaphod, curled himself up. He got a double dose of the gas, said Trillian, looking down at him. 2 windpipes. And stop talking, said Zaphod. It's hard enough trying to sleep anyway. What's the matter with the ground? It's all cold and hard. It's gold, said Ford. With an amazingly balletic movement, Zaphod was standing and scanning the horizon because that was how far the gold ground stretched, in every direction, perfectly smooth and solid. It gleamed like... It's impossible to say what it gleamed like, because nothing in the universe gleams in quite the same way that a planet made of solid gold does. Who put all that there? Yelled Zaphod, goggle-eyed. Don't get excited, said Ford. It's only a catalogue. A who? A catalogue, said Trillian. An illusion. How can you say that? Said Zaphod, falling to his hands and knees and staring at the ground. He poked it and prodded it. It was very heavy and very slightly soft. He could mark it with his fingernail. It was very yellow and very shiny. And when he breathed on it, his breath evaporated off it in a very peculiar and special way that breath evaporates. In that very peculiar and special way that breath evaporates off solid gold. Trillian and I came round a while ago, said Ford. We shouted and yelled till somebody came, and then carried on shouting and yelling till they got fed up and put us in their planet catalogue to keep us busy till they were ready to deal with us. This is all censor tape. Zaphod stared at him bitterly. Ah, shit, he said. You woke me up from my own perfectly good dream to show me somebody else's. He sat down in a huff. What's that series of valleys over there? He asked. Hallmark, said Ford. We had a look. We didn't wake you earlier, said Trillian. The last planet was knee deep in fish. Fish? Some people like the oddest things. And before that, said Ford, we had platinum. Bit dull, we thought. We thought you'd like to see this one, though. Seas of light glared at him in one solid blaze wherever they looked. Very pretty, said Ford petulantly. In the sky, a huge green catalogue number appeared. It flickered and changed, and when they looked around again, so had the land. As with one voice, they all went, "Ugh!" The sea was purple. The beach they were on was comprised of tiny yellow and green pebbles, presumably terribly precious stones. The mountains in the distance seemed soft and undulating with red peaks. Nearby stood a solid silver beach table with a frilly mauve parasol and silver tassels. In the sky, a huge sign appeared, replacing the catalogue number. It said, Whatever your tastes, Magrathea can cater for you. We are not proud. The 500 entirely naked women dropped out of and 500 entirely naked women dropped out of the sky on parachutes. In a moment the scene vanished and left them in a springtime meadow full of cows. Ow, said Zaphod. My brains! You want to talk about it? Said Ford. Yeah, okay, said Zaphod. And all three sat down and ignored the scenes that came and went around them. I figure this, said Zaphod. Whatever happened to my mind, I did it. And I did it in such a way that it wouldn't be detected by the government screening tests. And I wasn't to know anything about it myself. Pretty crazy, right? The other two nodded in agreement. So I reckon, what's so secret that I can't let anybody know? I know it. Not the galactic government, not even myself. And the answer is, I don't know, obviously. But I put a few things together and I can begin to guess. When did I decide to run for president? Shortly after the death of President Yoden Franks. You remember Yoden Ford? Yeah, said Ford. He was that guy we met when we were kids, the Arcturian captain. He was a gas. He gave us conkers. When you bust your way into his mega freighter, said you were the most amazing kid he ever met. What's all this? Said Trillian. Ancient history, said Ford. When we were kids together on Beetlejuice. The Arcturian mega freighters used to carry most of the bulky trade between Galactic Center to the outlying regions. The Beetlejuice trading scouts used to find the markers, and the Arcturians would supply them. Markets, not markers. Markets and the Arcturians would supply them. There was a lot of trouble with those space pirates before they were wiped out in the Dordelis Wars. And the mega freighters had to be equipped with the most fantastic defense shields known to galactic science. They were real brutes of ships, and huge. In orbit around a planet, they would eclipse the sun. One day, young Zaphod decides to raid one on a tri-jet scooter designed for stratosphere work. A mere kid. I mean, forget it. It was crazier than a mad monkey. I went along for the ride because I got some very safe money on him not doing it, and didn't want him coming back with fake evidence. So what happens? We get in his tri-jet, which he had souped up into something totally other, crossed 3 parsecs in a matter of weeks, burst our way into the mega freighter. I still don't know how. Marched onto the bridge, waving toy pistols and demanding conkers. A wilder thing I have not known. Lost me a year's pocket money. For what? Conkers. The captain was this really amazing guy, Yoden Franks, said Zaphod. He gave us food, booze, stuff from really weird parts of the galaxy, lots of conkers, of course, and we had just the most incredible time. Then he teleported us back into the maximum security wing of the Beetlejuice State Prison. He was a cool guy. Went on to become president of the galaxy. Zaphod paused. The scene around them was currently plunged into gloom. Dark mist swirled around them, and elephantine shapes lurked indistinctly in the shadows. The air was occasionally rent with the sound of illusory beings murdering other illusory beings. Presumably enough people must have liked this sort of thing to make it a paying proposition. Ford, said Zaphod quietly. Yeah. Just before Yoden died, he came to see me. What? You never told me. No. What did he say? What did he come to see you about? He told me about the Heart of Gold. It was his idea, that I should steal it. His idea? Yes, said Zaphod. And the only possible way of stealing it was to be at the launching ceremony. Ford gaped at him in astonishment for a moment, and then roared with laughter. Are you telling me, he said, that you set yourself up to become president of the galaxy just to steal that ship? That's it, said Zaphod with the sort of grin that would get most people locked away in a room with soft walls. But why? Said Ford. What's so important about having it? Dunno, said Zaphod. I think if I'd consciously known what was so important about it, and what I would need it for, it would have showed up on the brain screening tests, and I would never have passed. I think Yoden told me a lot of things that are still locked away. So you think you went and mucked about in your own brain as a result of Yoden talking to you? He was a hell of a talker. Yeah, but Zaphod, old mate. You want to look after yourself, you know? Zaphod shrugged. I mean, don't you have any inkling of the reasons for all this? Asked Ford. Zaphod thought hard about this, and doubt seemed to cross his mind. No, he said at last. I don't seem to be letting myself into any of my secrets. Still, he added, on further reflection, I can understand that. I wouldn't trust myself further than I could spit a rat. A moment later, the last planet in the catalogue vanished. Vanished from beneath them, and the solid world resolved itself again. They were sitting in a plush waiting room, full of glass-top tables and design awards. A Magrathian man was standing in front of them. The mice will see you now, he said. Chapter 30. So there you have it, said Slarty Bartfast, making a feeble and perfunctory attempt to clear away some of the appalling mess of his study. He picked up a piece of paper from the top of the pile, but then couldn't think of anywhere else to put it, so he put it back on top of the original pile, which promptly fell over. Deep thought designed the Earth. We built it, and you lived on it. And the Vogons came and destroyed it 5 minutes before the program was completed, added Arthur, not unbitterly. Yes, said the old man, pausing to gaze hopelessly around the room. 10 million years of planning and work gone, just like that. 10 million years, Earthman. Can you conceive of that kind of time span? A galactic civilization could grow from a single worm 5 times over in that time. Gone, he paused. Well, that's bureaucracy for you, he added. You know, said Arthur thoughtfully, all this explains a lot of things. All through my life I've had this strange, unaccountable feeling that something was going on in the world, something big, even sinister. And no one would tell me what it was. No, said the old man. That's just perfectly normal paranoia. Everyone in the universe has that. Everyone, said Arthur. Well, if everyone has that, perhaps it means something. Perhaps somewhere outside the universe, you know. Perhaps somewhere outside the universe we know. Maybe. Who cares, said Slutty Bartfast, before Arthur got too excited. Perhaps I'm old and tired, he continued. But I always think that the chances of finding out what really is going on are so absurdly remote that the only thing to do is to say, hang the sense of it, and just keep yourself occupied. Look at me, I designed coastlines. I got an award for Norway. He rummaged around in a pile of debris and pulled out a large perspex box with his name on it and a model of Norway molded into it. Where's the sense in that? He said. None that I've been able to make out, and I've been doing fjords all my life. For a fleeting moment they became fashionable, and I got a major award. He turned it over in his hands and with a shrug and tossed it aside carelessly, but not so carelessly that it didn't land on something soft. In this replacement Earth we're building, they've given me Africa to do, and of course I'm doing it with all the fjords again because I happen to like them, and I'm old-fashioned enough to think that they give a lovely Baroque feel to a continent. And they tell me it's not equatorial enough. Equatorial! He gave a hollow laugh. What does it matter? Science has achieved some wonderful things, of course, but I'd far rather be happy than right any day. And are you? No. That's where it all falls down, of course. Pity, said Arthur with sympathy. Sounds like quite a good lifestyle otherwise. Somewhere on the wall a small white light flashed. Come, said Slarty Bartfast. You are to meet the mice. Your arrival on the planet has caused considerable excitement. It has already been hailed, so I gather, as the third most improbable event in the history of the universe. What were the first two? Oh, probably just coincidences, said Slarty Bartfast carelessly. He opened the door and stood awaiting for Arthur to follow. Arthur glanced around him once more, and then down at himself, at the sweaty, disheveled clothes he'd been lying in the mud. He'd been lying in the mud on Thursday morning. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a sentence that works, yep. I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle, he muttered to himself. I beg your pardon? Asked the old man mildly. Oh, nothing, said Arthur. Only joking. Pandemic is over. Damn it! Of course we lost. We're screwed. Chapter 31. It is, of course, well known that careless talk costs lives. But the full scale of the problem is not always appreciated. For instance, at the very moment that Arthur said, I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle, a freak wormhole opened up in the fabric of the space-time continuum, and carried his words far, far back in time across almost infinite reaches of space, to a distant galaxy where strange, warlike beings were poised on the brink of a frightful interstellar battle. The two opposing leaders were meeting for the first time. A dreadful silence fell across the conference table as commander of the Volhergs, resplendent in his black jeweled battle shorts, gazed levelly at the Gagurvant leader squatting opposite him in a cloud of green, sweet-smelling steam, and with a million sleek and horribly beweaponed star cruisers poised to unleash electric death at his single word of command, challenged the vile creature to take back what he had said about his mother. The creature stirred in his sickly broiling vapor. At that very moment the words, I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle, drifted across the conference table. Unfortunately, in the Volherg tongue, this was the most dreadful insult imaginable. and there was nothing for it but to wage terrible war for centuries. Eventually, of course, after the galaxy had been decimated over a few thousand years, it was realized that the whole thing had been a ghastly mistake. And so the two opposing battle fleets settled their few remaining differences in order to launch a joint attack on our own galaxy, now positively identified as the source of the offending remark. For thousands more years, the mighty ships tore across the empty wastes of space and finally dived screaming onto the first planet they came across, which happened to be the Earth, which, due to a terrible miscalculation of scale, the entire battle fleet was accidentally swallowed by a small dog. Those who study the complex interplay of cause and effect in the history of the universe say that this sort of thing is going on all the time, but that we are powerless to prevent it. It's just life, they say. A short aircar trip brought Arthur and the old Magrathian to a doorway. They left the car and went through the door into a waiting room full of glass-topped tables and perspex awards. Almost immediately, a light flashed above the door at the other side of the room, and they entered. "Arthur, you're safe!" a voice cried. "Am I?" said Arthur, rather startled. "Oh, good." The lighting was rather subdued, and it took him a moment also to see 4 Trillion and Zaphod sitting around a large table beautifully decked out with exotic dishes, strange sweetmeats, and bizarre fruits. They were stuffing in their faces. "What happened to you?" demanded Arthur. "Well," said Zaphod, attacking a bone full of grilled muscle, "our guests here have been gassing us and zapping our minds and being generally weird, and have now given us a rather nice meal to make it up to us. Here," he said, winking out a lump of evil-smelling meat from a bowl. "Have some vegan rhino's cutlet. It's delicious if you happen to like that sort of thing." "Hosts?" said Arthur. "What hosts?" "I don't see any." A small voice said, "Welcome to lunch, Earth creature." Arthur glanced around and suddenly yelped. "Oh!" he said. "There are mice on the table!" There was an awkward silence as everyone looked pointedly at Arthur. He was busy staring at 2 white mice sitting in what looked like whiskey glasses on the table. He heard the silence and glanced around at everyone. "Oh," he said with sudden realization. "Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't quite prepared for—" "Let me introduce you," said Trillian. "Arthur, this is Benji Mouse." "Arthur, this is Benji Mouse." "Hi," said one of the mice. His whiskers stroked what must have been a touch-sensitive panel on the inside of the whiskey glass like affair, and it moved forward slightly. "And this is Frankie Mouse, the other mouse. Pleased to meet you." And did likewise. Arthur gaped. "But aren't they—" "Yes," said Trillian. "They are the mice I brought with me from the Earth." She looked him in the eye, and Arthur thought he detected the tiniest resigned shrug. "Could you pass me that bowl of grated Arcturian megadonkey?" she said. Slarty Bartfast coughed politely. Excuse me," he said. "Yes, thank you, Slarty Bartfast," said Benji Mouse sharply. "You may go." "What? Oh, very well," said the old man, slightly taken aback. "I'll just go and get on with some of my fjords then." Ah, well, in fact, that won't be necessary, said Frankie Mouse. It looks very much like we won't be needing the new Earth any longer. He swiveled his pink little eyes. Not now that we've found a native of the planet who was there seconds before it was destroyed. What? Cried Slarty Barfast aghast. You can't mean that. I've got 1,000 glaciers poised and ready to roll over Africa. Well, perhaps you can take a quick skiing holiday before you dismantle them, said Frankie acidly. Skiing holiday, cried the old man. Those glaciers are works of art, elegantly sculpted contours, soaring pinnacles of ice, deep, majestic ravines. It would be sacrilege to go skiing on high art. Thank you, Slarty Bartfast, said Benji firmly. That will be all. Yes, sir, said the old man coldly. Thank you very much. Well, goodbye, Earthman, he said to Arthur. Hope the lifestyle comes together. With a brief nod to the rest of the company, he turned and walked sadly out of the room. Arthur stared after him, not knowing what to say. Now, said Benji Mouse, to business. Ford and Zaphod clicked their glasses together. To business, they said. I beg your pardon, said Benji. Ford looked around. Sorry, I thought you were proposing a toast, he said. The two mice scuttled impatiently around in their glass transports. Finally, they composed themselves, and Benji moved forward to address Arthur. Now, Earth creature, he said, the situation we have in effect is this. We have, as you know, been more or less running your planet for the last 10 million years in order to find this wretched thing called the ultimate question. Why? Said Arthur sharply. No, we already thought of that one, said Frankie, interrupting. But it doesn't fit the answer. Why? 42? You see, it doesn't work. No, said Arthur. I mean, why have you been doing it? Oh, I see, said Frankie. Well, eventually, just habit, I think, to be brutally honest. And this is more or less the point. We're sick to the teeth of the whole thing. And the prospect of doing it all over again on account of those Winnet-ridden Vogons, quite frankly, gives me the screaming heebie-jeebies. You know what I mean? It was by the merest lucky chance that Benji and I finished our particular job and left the planet early for a quick holiday, and have since manipulated our way back to Magrathea by the good offices of your friends. Magrathea is a gateway back to our own dimension, put in Benji. Since when, continued his marine colleague, we have had an offer of a quite enormously fat contract to do the 5D chat show and lecture circuit back in our own dimensional neck of the woods, and we're very much inclined to take it. I would, wouldn't you, Ford? Said Zaphod promptingly. Oh yes, said Ford. Jump at it, like a shot. Arthur glanced at them, wondered what all this was leading up to. But we've got to have product, you see, said Frankie. I mean, ideally, we still need the ultimate question in some form or another. Zaphod leaned forward to Arthur. You see, he said, if they're just sitting there in the studio looking very relaxed and, just mentioning that they happen to know the answer to life, the universe, and everything, and then eventually have to admit that in fact it's 42, then the show is probably quite short. No follow-up, you see. We have to have something that sounds good, said Benji. Something that sounds good, exclaimed Arthur. An ultimate question that sounds good. From a couple of mice. The mice bristled. Well, I mean, yes, idealism. Yes, the dignity of pure research. Yes, the pursuit of truth in all its forms. But there comes a point, I'm afraid, where you begin to suspect that if there's any real truth, it's that the entire multidimensional infinity of the universe is almost certainly being run by a bunch of maniacs. And if it comes to a choice between spending yet another 10 million years finding that out, and on the other hand, just taking the money and running, then I, for one, could do with the exercise, said Frankie. But, started Arthur hopelessly. Hey, will you get this, Earthman? Interrupted Zaphod. You are a last generation product of that computer matrix, right? And you were right there up to the moment that your planet got the finger, yeah? So your brain was on the organic part of the penultimate configuration of the computer program, said Ford rather lucidly, he thought. Right? Said Zaphod. Well, said Arthur doubtfully. He wasn't aware of ever having felt an organic part of anything. He had always seen this. He had always seen this as one of his problems. In other words, said Benji, steering his curious little vehicle around right over to Arthur, there's a good chance that the structure of the question is encoded in the structure of your brain. So we want to buy it off you. What? The question? Said Arthur. Yes, said Ford and Trillian. For lots of money, said Zaphod. No, no, said Frankie. It's the brain we want to buy. What? Well, who would miss it? Inquired Benji. I thought you said you could just read his brain electronically, protested Ford. Oh, yes, said Frankie. But we'd have to get it out first. It's got to be prepared. Treated, said Benji. Diced. Thank you, shouted Arthur, tipping up his chair and backing away from the table in horror. It could always be replaced, said Benji reasonably, if you think it's important. Yes, an electronic brain, said Frankie. A simple one would suffice. A simple one, wailed Arthur. Yeah, said Zaphod with a sudden evil grin. You just have to program it to say what, and I don't understand, and where's the T? Who'd know the difference? What? Cried Arthur, backing away still further. See what I mean? Said Zaphod, and howled in pain because of something that Trillian did in that moment. I'd notice the difference, said Arthur. No, you wouldn't, said Frankie Mouse. You'd be programmed not to. Ford made for the door. Look, I'm sorry, mice old lads, he said. I don't think we've got a deal. I rather think we have to have a deal, said the mice in chorus, all the charm vanishing from their piping little voices in an instant. With a tiny whining shriek of their two glass transports lifted themselves off the table and swung through the air towards Arthur, who stumbled further backwards into a blind corner, utterly unable to cope or think of anything. Trillian grabbed him desperately by the arm and tried to drag him towards the door, which Ford and Zaphod were struggling to open, but Arthur was dead weight. He seemed hypnotized by the airborne rodents swooping towards him. She screamed at him, but he just gaped. With one more yank, Ford and Zaphod got the door open. On the other side of it was a small pack of rather ugly men, who they could only assume were the heavy mob of Magrathea. Not only were they ugly themselves, but the medical equipment they carried with them was also far from pretty. They charged. So, Arthur was about to have his head cut open. Trillian was unable to help him, and Ford and Zaphod were about to be set upon by several thugs, a great deal heavier and more sharply armed than they were. All in all, it was extremely fortunate that at that moment every alarm in the planet burst into an ear-splitting din. Chapter 32. Emergency, emergency, blared the klaxons throughout Magrathea. Hostile ship has landed on planet. Armed intruders in Section 8A. Defense stations, defense stations! The two mice sniffed irritably around the fragments of their glass transports, where they lay shattered on the floor. Damnation, muttered Frankie Mouse. All that fuss over 2 pounds of earthling brain. He scuffled round and about, his pink eyes flashing, his fine white coat bristling with static. The only thing we can do now, said Benji, crouching and stroking his whiskers in thought, is to try and fake a question. Invent one that will sound plausible. Difficult, said Frankie, he thought. How about what's yellow and dangerous? Benji considered this for a moment. No good, he said. Doesn't fit the answer. They sank into silence for a few seconds. All right, said Benji. What do you get if you multiply 6 by 7? No, too literal, too factual, said Frankie. Wouldn't sustain the punter's interests. Again they thought. Then Frankie said, Here's a thought. How many roads must a man walk down? Ah, said Benji. Aha! Now that does sound promising. He rolled the phrase around a little. Yes, he said. That's excellent. Sounds very significant without actually tying you down to the meaning of anything at all. How many roads must a man walk down? 42. Excellent. That'll fox him, Frankie baby. We are made. They performed a scampering dance in their excitement. Near them on the floor lay several rather ugly men who had been hit about the head with some heavy design awards. Half a mile away, 4 figures pounded up their corridor looking for a way out. They emerged into a wide-open plan computer bay. They glanced about wildly. Which way you reckon, Zaphod? Said Ford. At a wild guess, I'd say down there, said Zaphod, running off down to the right between a computer bank and the wall. As the others started after him, he was brought up short by a killer zap energy bolt that cracked through the air inches in front of him and fried a small section of adjacent wall. A voice on loud hailer said, Okay, Beeblebrox, hold it right there. We've got you covered. Cops, hissed Zaphod, and span around in a crouch. You want to try guess it all, Ford? Okay, this way, said Ford. And the 4 of them ran down a gangway between 2 computer banks. At the end of the gangway appeared a heavily armored, space-suited figure waving a vicious killer zap gun. We don't want to shoot you, Beeblebrox, shouted the figure. Suits me fine, shouted Zaphod back and dived down a wide gap between the two data process units. My god, where did the fucking word bank come from? The other swerved in behind him. There are 2 of them, said Trillian. We're cornered. They squeezed themselves down in an angle between a large computer data bank and the wall. The word data actually was there though this time, so great. Good on me. They held their breath and waited. Suddenly the air exploded with energy bolts as both the cops opened fire on them simultaneously. "Hey, they're shooting at us," said Arthur, crouching in a tight ball. "I thought they said they didn't want to do that." "Yeah, I thought they said that," agreed Ford. Zaphod stuck his head up for a dangerous moment. "Hey," he said, "I thought you said you didn't want to shoot us," and ducked again. They waited. After a moment, a voice replied, "It isn't easy being a cop." "What did he say?" whispered Ford in astonishment. "He said it isn't easy being a cop." "Well, surely that's his problem, isn't it?" "I'd have thought so." Ford shouted out, "Hey, listen, I think we've got enough problems of our own. Having you shouting at us as if you could avoid laying your problems on us as well. So if you could avoid laying your problems on us as well, I think we'd all find it easier to cope." Another pause, and then a loud hailer again. "Now see here, guy," said the voice of the loud hailer. "You're not dealing with any dumb 2-bit trigger-pumping morons with low hairlines, little piggy eyes, and no conversation. We're a couple of intelligent, caring guys that you'd probably quite like if you'd met us socially. I don't go around gratuitously shooting people and then bragging about it afterwards in seedy space rangers bars, like some cops I could mention. I go around shooting people gratuitously and then agonize about it afterwards for hours to my girlfriend." "And I'm writing novels," chimed in the other cop. "Though I haven't had any of them published yet, so I'd better warn you, I'm in a mean mood." "Aw, mood guy." Ford's eyes popped halfway out their sockets. "Who are these guys?" he said. "Dunno," said Zaphod. "I think I preferred it when they were shooting." "So are you going to come quietly?" shouted one of the cops again. "Or are you going to let us blast you out?" "Which would you prefer?" shouted Ford. A millisecond later, the air about them started to fry again, as bolt after bolt of Killer Zap hurled itself into the computer bank in front of them. The fusillade continued for several seconds at unbearable intensity. When it stopped, there were a few seconds of near quietness as the echoes died away. "You still there?" called one of the cops. "Yes," they called back. "We didn't enjoy that at all," shouted the other cop. "We could tell," shouted Ford. "Now, listen to this, Beetlebrox. And you better listen good." "Why?" shouted back Zaphod. "Because," shouted the cop, "it's going to be very intelligent and quite interesting and humane. Now, either you all give yourselves up now and let us beat you up a bit, though not very much, of course, because we're firmly opposed to needless violence, or we blow up this entire planet and possibly one or two others we noticed on our way out here." "But that's crazy!" cried Trillian. "You wouldn't do that!" "Oh, yes, we would," shouted the cop. "Wouldn't we?" he asked the other one. "Oh, yes, we'd have to, no question," said the other one called back. "But why?" demanded Trillian. "Because there are some things you have to do even if you are an enlightened liberal cop who knows all about sensitivity and everything." "I just don't believe these guys," muttered Ford, shaking his head. One cop shouted to the other, "Shall we shoot them again for a bit?" "Yeah, why not?" They let fly another electric barrage. The heat and noise was quite fantastic. Slowly the computer bank was beginning to disintegrate. The front had almost all melted away, and thick rivulets of molten metal were winding their way back towards where they were squatting. They huddled further back and waited for the end. Chapter 33. But the end never came, at least not then. Quite suddenly the barrage stopped, and the sudden silence afterwards was punctuated by a couple of strangled gurgles and thuds. The four stared at each other. "What happened?" said Arthur. "They stopped," said Zaphod with a shrug. "Why?" "Dunno. Do you want to go and ask them?" "No." They waited. "Hello?" called out Ford. No answer. "That's odd. Perhaps it's a trap." "They haven't the wit." "What were those thuds?" "Dunno." They waited for a few more seconds. "Right," said Ford. "I'm going to have a look." He glanced around at the others. "Is no one going to say, 'No one could possibly let me go in'? No, couldn't you? You can't. Is no one going to say, 'No, you can't possibly let me go instead'?" They all shook their heads. "Oh, well," he said, and stood up. For a moment nothing happened. Then, after a second or so, nothing continued to happen. Ford peered through the thick smoke that was billowing out from the burning computer. Cautiously, he stepped out into the open. Still nothing happened. 20 yards away, he could dimly see through the smoke the 20 spacesuited... What? Sorry. 20 yards away, he could dimly see through the smoke the space-suited figure of one of the cops. He was lying in a crumpled heap on the ground. 20 yards in the other direction lay the second man. No one else was anywhere to be seen. This struck Ford as being extremely odd. Slowly, nervously, he walked towards the first one. The body lay reassuringly still as he approached it, and continued to lie reassuringly still as he reached it and put his foot down on the killer zap gun that still dangled from its limp fingers. He reached down and picked it up, meeting no resistance. The cop was quite clearly dead. A quick examination revealed to him to be from the Blagulon Kappa. He was a methane-breathing life form dependent on his spacesuit for survival in the thin oxygen atmosphere of Magrathea. The tiny life support system computer on his backpack appeared unexpectedly to have blown up. Ford poked around it in considerable astonishment. These miniature suit computers usually had a full backup of the main computer back on the ship, with which they were directly linked through the sub-ether. Such a system was a fail-safe in all circumstances other than total feedback malfunction, which was unheard of. He hurried over to the other prone figure and discovered the exact same impossible thing had happened to him, presumably simultaneously. He called the others over to look. They came, shared his astonishment, but not his curiosity. "Let's get shot of this hole," said Zaphod. "If whatever I'm supposed to be looking for is here, I don't want it." He grabbed the second killer zap gun, blasted a perfectly harmless accounting computer, and rushed out into the corridor, followed by the others. He very nearly blasted hell out of an air car that stood waiting for them a few yards away. The air car was empty, but Arthur recognized it as belonging to Slarty Bartfast. It had a note from him pinned to part of its sparse instrument panel. The note had an arrow down on it, pointing to one of the controls. It said, "This is probably the best button to press." Chapter 34. Oh God, where's my drink? The air car rocketed them at speeds in excess of R-17 through the steel tunnel that led out onto the appalling surface of the planet, which was now in the grip of yet another drear morning twilight. Ghastly grey light congealed on the land. R is a velocity measure defined as reasonable speed of travel that is consistent with health, mental well-being, and not being more than, say, 5 minutes late. It is therefore clearly an almost infinitely variable figure according to circumstances, since the first two factors vary not only with speed taken as an absolute, but also with awareness of the third factor. Unless handled with tranquility, this equation can result in considerable stress, ulcers, and even death. R17 is not a fixed velocity, but it is clearly far too fast. The aircar flung itself through the air at R17 and above, deposited them next to the heart of gold, which stood starkly on the frozen ground like a bleached bone, and then precipitately hurled itself back in the direction whence they had come, presumably on important business of its own. Shivering, the four of them stood and looked at the ship. Beside it stood another one. It was the Blagulon Kappa police craft, a bulbous shark-like affair, slate green in colour and smothered with black stencilized letters of varying degrees of size and unfriendliness. The letters informed anyone who cared to read them as to where the ship was from, what section of police it was assigned to, and where the power feeds should be connected. It seemed somehow unnaturally dark and silent, even for a ship whose two-man crew was at the moment lying asphyxiated in a smoke-filled chamber several miles beneath the ground. It is one of those curious things that is impossible to explain or define, but one can sense when a ship is completely dead. Ford can sense it and found it most mysterious. A ship and two policemen seemed to have gone spontaneously dead. In his experience, the universe simply didn't work like that. The other three could sense it too, but they could sense the bitter cold even more and hurried back into the heart of gold, suffering from an acute attack of no curiosity. Ford stayed and went to examine the Blagulon ship. As he walked, he nearly tripped over an inert steel figure lying face down on the ground in the cold dust. "Marvin!" he exclaimed. "What are you doing?" "Don't feel like you have to take any notice of me, please," came the muffled drone. "But how are you, Metal Man?" said Ford, very depressed. "What's up? I don't know," said Marvin. "I've never been there." "Why," said Ford, squatting down beside him and shivering, "are you lying face down in the dust?" "It's a very effective way of being wretched," said Marvin. Don't pretend you want to talk to me. I know you hate me." "No, I don't." "Yes, you do. Everybody does. It's part of the shape of the universe. I only have to talk to somebody and they begin to hate me. Even robots hate me. If you just ignore me, I expect I shall probably go away." He jacked himself up onto his feet and stood resolutely facing the opposite direction. That ship hated me," he said dejectedly, indicating the police craft. "The ship?" said Ford in sudden excitement. "What happened to it? Do you know?" "It hated me because I talked to it." "You talked to it?" exclaimed Ford. "What do you mean, you talked to it?" "Simple. I got very bored and depressed, so I went and plugged myself into its external computer feed and talked to the computer at great length and explained my view of the universe to it," said Marvin. "And what happened?" said Ford. It committed suicide, said Marvin, and stalked off back to the Heart of Gold. Chapter 35. That night, as the Heart of Gold was busy putting a few light years between itself and the Horsehead Nebula, Zaphod lounged under a small palm tree on the bridge, trying to bang his brains into shape with massive pangalactic gargle blasters. Ford and Trillian sat in a corner discussing life and matters arising from it, and Arthur took to his bed to flip through Ford's copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Since he was going to have to live in the place, he reasoned, he'd better start finding out something about it. He came across this entry. It said, "The history of every major galactic civilization tends to pass through 3 distinct and recognizable phases. Those phases of survival, inquiry, and sophistication, otherwise known as the how, why, and where phases. For instance, the first phase is characterized by the question, how can we eat? The second by the question, why do we eat? And the third by the question, where shall we have lunch?" He got no further before the ship's intercom buzzed to life. "Hey, Earthman, you hungry, kid?" said Zaphod's voice. Well, yes, a little peckish, I suppose," said Arthur. "Okay, baby, hold tight," said Zaphod. "We'll take in a quick bite at the restaurant at the end of the universe." The end. I hope you enjoyed. That is the end. So we will definitely be taking a little short hiatus to do some stuff. Other than, reading on Saturdays. Because reasons. Applause. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed. That was fun to read, if a little tongue twistery at times. I did enjoy it though. It was a lot of fun, and I may consider reading the second book in the series, but don't hold your breath. As I say, I intend when we get back to it after a little bit of a break, to do Stephen King's Misery, because you know what? I want you all to be sad. Or scared, or just generally intimidated, or something. Anyway, Misery is a good one. If you haven't read it, totally should. But we're going to read it on the channel anyway, so, don't rush to do that, if you don't want to. Of all the authors you could read, you've picked the one with the most made-up, daft words and names. Oh! Thank you so much for the cheers. Jeez, wow. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's never happened before. That's so many cheers. My gosh. 1 down and 4 to go in the trilogy. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening and the cheers. Oh. I thought my cat had like a lump in her skin, but it was just my headphone, my earphone, just in her fur for a minute there. I got really concerned. But don't panic, she's fine. Everything's fine. So it's looking like I might not be streaming on Friday as normal, because I've got plans to go to a escape room with some friends that day, so it's going to be taking place in the evening, because of course everybody has day jobs except me. So I will be making plans that evening. I don't know what that means, because I may or may not decide to do stream on a different day that week, or none at all. It really depends. thank you so much for being here. I'm gonna put you down, Pudding. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna just check real quick. Well, unless you guys want to watch bees, there's no one really around to raid just now. So I will actually just leave you here for the night. You probably will want to tuck yourselves in. If you type !Discord, there should be a link with an invite that you can find the channel on, etc., etc. And when Dan is able, he will verify you, etc. and stuff. So just click that link and you will find your way to the Discord channel, if you haven't already. Yes, we have many links. I should really do a panel of all the exclamation points that I've got going for us, because I just don't just now, and I really should. It's just occurred to me that I should do that, and I'll maybe make it pretty. I don't know. I've got time, I guess. I'm not doing anything. But anyway, that's a future me problem. So thank you so much for the cheers, your support, spending time with me and chilling out with me. And I do appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dan, Gray, aggressively especially, and of course Avnok as well, Chopper, and whoever else joined us on the stream. Starbreeze, yay! And whoever else. Starbreeze. You guys are my peeps. Anyway, so sorry. Just unironically said that, and that makes me upset. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. Sleep well when you go. If it is not your bedtime, have a great time zone. And I will see you on Monday. Good night, guys. Bye-bye.